You prefer I had a beard?
Would give us something to talk about.
I'm sure we've already got plenty to talk about.
Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of Department Q on Netflix. You should note, if you're watching this or listening to this, that we will probably spoil the entire show starting right now. So, we are going to talk about it, assuming you have seen the entire show. Joining me today for this conversation, she is the chief film critic and deputy editor at Lainey Gossip. You've also heard her wonderful coverage of The White Lotus right here on Decoding TV. Sarah Marrs, welcome back to Decoding TV.
Hi, Dave.
So great to have you, Sarah, to talk about Department Q, which is a new 9-episode Netflix original series based on the book series by Danish writer Jussi Adler-Olsen. Before we talk about the plot of the show, what happened in the show, I guess let's just start by discussing overall thoughts. What did you think of Department Q?
I loved it. I was hooked by the end of the first episode. I was like all in, and I watched it over 3 days. It was I really, really liked it. I love a good detective story. You do kind of have to wrangle with the propaganda of it all. But I think they actually did a pretty good job of all of the cops are kind of assholes, and they're not really good at solving crimes. They solve one crime the entire season and the crime is years old. But yeah, I do love a good detective story, and it did feel a little Sherlocky in that he's the brilliant detective who's hard to get along with. And I just thought it was a really great ensemble. It was enjoyable to watch all of those actors. I'm a huge fan of Matthew Goode, so I really enjoy when he gets a leading role, because I feel like a lot of the times he sort of gets in third or fourth position and you don't get enough of him. But if you haven't seen the 2013 film Stoker starring Matthew Goode, Mia Wasikowska, Nicole Kidman, do yourself a favor, watch Stoker. So it was a really, really good show. And I went out and I got the first 2 books from my library. And the first book I just kind of skimmed because obviously now I know how it all works out. So I wasn't really into the mystery, but I wanted to see how they described the characters compared to how they are on the show. And I'm now halfway through the second book, and I do hope that they make more of this because I think they are really good mysteries.
Well, there's also a movie based off of the first book that covers a similar plot to what is here in the show, but it's quite different because it's a movie. They had adapted a bunch of stuff. They've cut out a bunch of stuff, right?
Yes. And there was are you talking about the German language film from about 10 years ago?
Yes.
Because I think the reason Netflix got into the Department Q business is because those German language films were randomly very popular on Netflix about a decade ago.
Actually, what I'm referring to is the Danish film, The Keeper of Lost Causes, that came out in 2013. So I don't know if that is what you're referring to.
That's Danish language film.
Yeah,
but there were films that hit big on Netflix, and now they're making an English language version. And
right, but it's interesting because that movie, Keeper of Lost Causes, based off of the first book in the Department Q series, and they changed a lot because it's a movie, and also all the names are anglicized in the Department Q version, right?
Except for the main character.
Well, Karl Mork, but even Karl Mork, he doesn't have the accent. Merritt Lingard is spelled differently, and that so it's they've made some changes to.
I actually looked it up because I was curious with the name Mork, which is M-O with the line through it, R-C-K in the books. And it's just M-O-R-C-K in the show.
Correct.
There is a place called Mork. It's just M-O-R-K in England. So I'm in theory, this is a name someone could have because their ancestor 500 or 600 years ago was from some random village.
Right. Yeah. It all works out.
So they I think maybe that's why they didn't change his name, because they were sort of able to it's a place in England. It works out. It's fine. It's that sound, the Mork sound is a sound that I think maybe people would be at least somewhat familiar with, especially because Vikings in England, that's a whole thing in history. So
but yeah, other changes. Merritt Lingard is spelled differently in the movie, and also the character of Akram is actually named Assad in the film version of The Keeper of Lost Causes. And I guess they wanted to change the character's name from Assad from Syria into something else to keep it simpler. So that's understandable. Anyway, Department Q, I was also a huge fan of Sarah Marrs. I really enjoyed this. Uh, the ending of episode 1 was really brilliant, and we can talk about that in a bit. But this is a very satisfying mystery that I think actually had something to say. It had really memorable characters. It had a mystery that like revealed itself to you in a satisfying way with a good pacing. And it had like a fairly eventful ending that delivered a lot of what I think people were looking for. There's a lot of stuff that was unaddressed by the end of the first season as well that we can also discuss.
Well, there's multiple mysteries.
Yes.
And the big one is the Merritt Lingard disappearance,
Right.
which is the literal only thing they solve.
Yes. Yes.
But there's like a bigger story that has to do with Carl and his former partner, and they don't solve that. And that seems like, no, that's a bigger thing that's going to carry through. It's a little bit of like a procedural format where instead of it being episodic, where each episode is a different case, it's like anthological. The season is the Merritt Lingard case, but there are these other stories that sort of go through that might carry into, if they do a season 2, we have to figure out what happened to Carl and his partner where they got shot. That was not solved.
Well, that is true, but there is no definitive answer offered as to what happened there. There is a dream answer that we can potentially take at face value, but let's discuss that in a bit. So let's talk about. So overall, Sarah Marrs and I both really like the show. I think we both are looking forward to a season 2. Loved the characters, and I kind of loved what the show was trying to say too, which is that behind this show and many cold case murder mysteries, so on and so forth, is the idea that like a single act can shape the rest of your life, right? Like one act, one moment of carelessness can impact, how you think of yourself and your ethos and how the rest of your life unfolds. And I got some real Old Boy vibes from this. I don't know if you've seen that film.
Mm-hmm.
But got some real Old Boy vibes in terms of like the revenge of that movie and what's going on with this movie and somebody being locked somewhere without understanding what's going on. And so, yeah, a lot of good stuff here. Let's dive into what actually goes on. I've adapted this plot summary from Wikipedia. Detective Chief Inspector Carl Mork returns to work following a shooting incident in which he was badly wounded. His colleague and friend James Hardy was paralyzed, and a uniformed police officer was killed. He receives a muted welcome as he's regarded as arrogant and appears to look down on his colleagues. He has to undergo therapy for the after effects of the shooting. The Scottish government has decided it would be good for PR to focus on unsolved cold cases. So Mork's hard-pressed and under-resourced commander, Moira Jacobson, is offered a substantial budget to set up a new department to this end, the titular Department Q. She prefers to use most of the budget for her own department and current cases, so she assigns Mork as the sole officer dealing with a large number of cold cases, and he's given a semi-derelict basement office. A civilian employee, Akram Salim, quietly insinuates himself into Mork's basement. He presents Mork with the case of Merritt Lingard, a prosecutor who vanished 4 years earlier. Eventually, DC Rose Dixon and Mork's paraplegic former partner, James Hardy, help him to solve the case. So let's talk about some of the major subplots. And of course, the big one is what happened with Merritt Lingard. The major twist in this storyline is that the character we thought of as Sam Haig, who is Merritt Lingard's affair partner, I guess, is actually Lyle Jennings pretending to be Sam Haig. Lyle Jennings is the brother of Harry Jennings, who, when they were younger, was in love with Merritt, and who invaded Merritt's house at her behest and brutally beat Merritt's brother, William. Merritt's plan was to steal her mother's jewelry and use it to escape from Moore, their hometown, and she put Harry up to this, but Harry dies in the aftermath. Lyle and his mother, Ilsa, blame Merritt for Harry's death, which is why they kidnap and imprison Merritt in a hyperbaric chamber. Eventually, Mork and Akram find Merritt. Akram kills Lyle, and Ilsa shoots herself before being apprehended by the police.
Yeah, the gun violence in this show is pretty graphic. They do not shy away from some pretty gory shots. So just if that's something people are sensitive to, like it's not a lot, but when it happens, it's kind of rough. Ilsa dying by suicide was gross.
Yeah, and to be fair, what Akram did in the last episode was pretty badass, I have to say.
Yeah.
He, you know, Detective Mork, they both get a hero moment. I like that, where Detective Mork throws himself in front of the shotgun, and then Akram gets to jump on Lyle and turns the tables on him in a very badass way. So I like that.
Akram is a secret badass. He's a political refugee from Syria. He was a police officer in Syria. There is a wonderful line in the show when Carl says, "Were you working for the good guys or the bad guys?" And as you know, Syria has been sundered by civil war for many years now. Akram says, "Tell me if you figure it out."
Right.
Basically, like, I don't know. And he does show some skills that UK cops might not have. Some enhanced interrogation skills, if you
Perhaps.
will. And yeah, he does come through with some very, very slick, cool. Again, it's not a lot, but when it happens, the action beats are great.
Yeah.
And the arc for Carl, he and his partner are shot at the beginning of the series, and part of his guilt is, not only was James paralyzed, so his life is forever changed in a significant way. So there's an element of, I don't know if survivor's guilt is the right term for Carl, but he's definitely dealing with, like he essentially walks away from the shooting. He's got a scar, but there doesn't seem to be physically long-term ramifications. It seems like the bullet went through his neck, didn't hit anything really important, and he has healed and he's back doing his job physically. In that moment, though, he's behind James, and the bullet passes through James and into Carl. And then at the end of the series, when he steps in front of Akram,
Yes.
it's sort of closing the loop
Yes.
on the thing that he blames himself for not doing in that first instance, which is like, honestly, I don't think he could have moved fast enough. He and James were standing several feet apart. Like, realistically, I don't think he could have done anything, but he's blaming himself for James being injured. And in the end, he then gets to sort of have that moment play out again. And this time he steps in front of the gun. People should stop shooting him at a certain point. You're not going to walk away from it. But, it is kind of a nice parallel from first to last with his two partners, which the show has some really good thematic work. And one of them is PTSD. Rose is dealing with PTSD.
Yeah.
Akram, he presents as if he's very contained and very self-controlled, but every once in a while you get a glimpse of a lot of turmoil under the water there. And Carl has a lot of sort of residual PTSD things happening as well. So it was kind of I really liked the parallel from first to last with his two partners and how those moments play out, because I think it works thematically as well as just good action beats.
Yeah. I agree, Sarah. And in addition to that, we should point out that Carl Mork is introduced as such a raging asshole in the opening scene, and so it's not just about stepping in front of your partner. It's that, like, he treats everyone, Akram included, with such disdain. But then by the end, I think what I love about their relationship is he despite being an asshole, Carl Mork recognizes when somebody has talent. Like, he knows when somebody has skill, and Akram eventually wins him over.
He goes to bat for Akram and Rose. Like, he's never friendly. Like, there does seem to be an element of Carl that he's just kind of that type of person. He's prickly, he's guarded. He, quite frankly, is a better detective than all of the people we see, except for Akram, who he does come to respect. He is a better detective than all of those people. And he's buddy with James Hardy at the beginning of the series. Well, James is a good investigator. So there does seem to be some part of Carl, like, he is very much in that Sherlock mold where he will let people in if he thinks they're on his level. If he does not think you're on his level, he's going to treat you like straight garbage.
So I like that Akram won him over. One of my favorite things about Akram is he always introduces himself as "I am Akram." Like, he doesn't say who he is or where he's from. Like, he just says "I am Akram," and that's a wonderful kind of refrain throughout the show. But Sarah, one of my most moving moments from the show is they've saved Merritt Lingard, they've gotten her out of the situation, and then I think it cuts to months later,
Mhm.
and Merritt goes to the police station to visit Carl Mork and the team and say thank you and hi, and they bump into each other at the elevator, and Mork does not introduce himself to her, and it was at that moment I realized, oh, I guess they never met. It was Akram that saved her when they arrived at the scene, um, and he doesn't like say, "Hey, like I'm the guy that saved you." You know, like he doesn't say anything. It's just like a very understated moment where he kind of acknowledges her and they go on their separate ways. And I thought that was very, very beautiful. It was more moving than if they had done the whole like, "Oh, you saved me, thank you so much," like very, sentimental, potentially maudlin thing. That moment when they just kind of acknowledge each other really worked for me, and was a great capper to this character of Carl Mork, who throughout most of the first season has been very flamboyant and irritating and not a nice person. For him to just kind of acknowledge, like, hey, like, you know, it's cool. Like, just acknowledge her without taking any credit, without making a big show of it. I thought it was very nice. What did you think of that moment, Sarah Mars?
I really liked it. It's also, again, consistent thematics. The Carl Mork we have known for 9 hours up to that point would not bask in glory,
Mm,
and he doesn't. Like, and every time they put him in front of the media, he melts down. Like,
yeah,
he doesn't handle public attention well at all. That's where he sort of diverges from the Sherlock archetype, which is he doesn't thrive on recognition and attention. He prefers to work kind of on his own, in his own space. And the idea that he would do anything in that moment, I'm like, no, by the time we get there, it's like, no, this is exactly how he would respond. That he would just acknowledge that she's a person standing in front of him, but he wouldn't introduce himself. He wouldn't say anything to her and just kind of let it go because he's already, in his mind, that case is solved. We are now looking for the next case. So, like, he's already kind of moving to the next thing. And here she is coming back 3 months later to say thank you. And like, he doesn't need it. That's
yeah.
not what he's
But
looking for.
I also think he finally is able to take satisfaction in his own police work. In that moment, I think he's very pleased with himself in that moment, and I think that's been something that has been missing throughout the show. Is that he had that's my sense, is that he's kind of like lost the love of the game.
Well,
Was
yeah,
kind of
because he's
my sense.
coming
Yeah,
back from such a traumatic event.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that shooting where he and James are injured and the rookie cop is killed, um, it's unsolved. I mean, they get to the end. By the time the series ends, I think it's been roughly 8 to 9 months from the shooting because they get shot and then there's a 4 month jump and it's Carl coming back to work and getting the Department Q assignment and taking on Merritt's case. And then I'm not really sure how much time lapses there, but it feels like maybe a few weeks. And then there's a 3 month jump to Merritt coming in to say thank you. So it's maybe like 8 to 9 months ish. And it's only through solving her case and saving someone and stepping in front of the shot that was aimed at Akram and all of those things
yeah.
that he's able to sort of get fully back into the saddle. Because reading the books, again, I only kind of skimmed the first one. I was mostly looking for character descriptions in that book because I knew how the mystery ended. But going through the second one, Department Q is supposed to be like a pretty efficient
Mm,
machine. Like, he gets it going and they chug along. That is not how they're operating in season one.
right.
So I do think it's a little bit of a prologue where it's like, here's all the pieces coming together, but he has to resolve some of this trauma stuff that's hanging over him from this traumatic shooting event. And it's only when he closes a case and knows it was a job well done that he's kind of like, okay, now we can become that really efficient cold case unit. Um, because he has to prove to himself that he can still do it.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll see how the show decides to handle it. I think there's something very pleasantly scrappy and underdog-like about the current Department Q. And
I do like them being a little bit of a ramshackle group. And I'm not sure that would necessarily change, but it is presented in the books as more like he is this super capable investigator, but he's also like it's very Scandinavian. We are running like clockwork.
So let's talk about like some of the biggest twists from the season. I already alluded to one. Let's talk about that really briefly. I did like the reveal that Sam Hague is Lyle Jennings. That was kind of cool. And then you go back and my favorite part about that is there is a photo of Sam Hague on the wall. And so Sam Hague and Lyle Jennings have very similar appearance and hairstyle.
Yeah, they both have the same ratty mullet.
Yeah, and there's a photo on the wall at the climbing place where Sam Hague is giving a middle finger and he's blocking his face. And when you see it, you're like, oh, that's just the Sam Hague from earlier that we've seen sleep with Merritt Lingard. Turns out, whole different guy. If he just hadn't been giving a finger at that moment, Sarah Marrs, they might have solved this case a lot sooner. You know what I mean?
I don't know if they would until they found a picture of the guy who was claiming to be Sam Hague. Like they don't.
Yeah,
they didn't have anything.
Maybe that was just for our benefit. That was just for our benefit.
I think it's just for our benefit as the watcher, because within the story, like Akram and Carl never see Sam Hague. He's a name on a page. Like he's someone that they're trying to run down because he had contact with Merritt before she disappeared, but then he's murdered. So this is another mystery. What happened to Sam Hague? Was it related to Merritt? And I don't think they had nothing to indicate that was two different people until they start unwinding what really happened to Merritt, which is the beauty of that mystery is it is so layered, because when she disappears, Merritt is the sort of lead prosecutor on a very high profile murder case where a wealthy man has been accused of murdering his wife in a very the staircase kind of scenario.
Yeah.
And she loses that case. So you are kind of assuming that her disappearance, and as they're sort of tracking down, they're going back 4 years, what happened? What was she up to? It's like, well, she had this case and she lost it. And also there's these quirks about the case. Well, it turns out there's corruption. Like now they're kind of looking at her boss and other people in the Crown office. Like, what's going on there? There seems to be corruption. Sam Hague is pulling on that same thread of he's a journalist. He's looking into corruption in the Crown office as well. And so you really are thinking that she was kidnapped. People presume she's dead because she just fell off the face of the earth. Literally, she disappeared on a ferry where Harry Jennings also fell off and died years earlier. So people just assume she fell off the ferry and died, but really she was kidnapped. And you really think it has to do with the case and the corruption and Sam Hague's investigation. And Merritt thinks it has to do with her law career because she's being asked, like, do you know why you're here? And on the walls of this super awful hyperbaric chamber, she's written names of people she's prosecuted or people she's had contact with through her cases. So she also thinks she's been kidnapped because of her law career.
Right.
And it's really not until like the 11th hour that it's like, oh no, the Scooby-Doo mask is revealed and Sam Hague is Lyle Jennings, and it's him and his mom punishing her for what happened to Harry, which I will take one issue with something you said earlier, which is that Harry robbed her house on her behest. He didn't, though. They were teenagers in a dead-end small town, and she was desperate to get out. And her mom had died, and at the time, her dad was an abusive drunk, and she really wanted to leave. Her mom came from a wealthy family and had this nice jewelry, and she was saying like one ring could buy us a ticket out of here. And Harry was like, well, we should just take it. And she says, I can't, because my dad would know it was me, and he would chase me down, and he would kill me. And at no point does she actually say to Harry, break in and steal this ring. And it is later implied when Ilsa Jennings is blaming her for his death. She's like, I never told him to do that.
Right.
And Ilsa says like, well, but he would have done anything for you and you should have known. But it's like, they were literally like 15, 16 years old. Like, they're teenagers. There's no way she's going to make the leap that he's actually going to do that, especially because Harry was not the troubled brother. He was not the one that you would think would do something like that.
Right.
It was an out of character incident from him. So it is just that it is this thing of like one choice can have these massive ramifications for your life, but that choice can be unconscious. It can be an accident, a coincidence. Like in the end, it's not even anything that Merritt did intentionally that caused all of this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That it can not even be something you did intentionally. She just was expressing a longing, right?
Yeah.
But what we do see is that the consequences of the Jennings' actions do seem to shape the rest of her life. Like she goes into public service, she spends a lot of time dedicated to taking care of William, and also her personality is different. Like she's much more
Careful.
sunny, let's say, when she's younger. And then as an older person, I'm impressed with how the show was really committed to making older version of Merritt Lingard just really unpleasant, I would say.
Yes, deeply unlikable. When they first introduce her case, it feels like kind of like Carl. It kind of feels like,
She's
literally anyone who met her could have killed her because nobody liked her.
Yeah. But yeah, you see how this single event reverberates through the decades, and that I think is very effective. Speaking of twists, the big twist that I think you and I were huge fans of is the end of episode 1. The show is setting it up as though you think Merritt is going to be part of Department Q. There's this line where Moira says, hey, you get your own office, you get your budget, you even get an advocate, And so it's like, oh, I see. So this woman who's prosecuting this case, she's going to team up with Carl Mork. And then and that's where I think the whole thing is heading. And together they're going to form Department Q. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, it's revealed actually Merritt isn't going to work with Department Q. She is the subject of their first case. And that's when the show really hooked me.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I'm with this show until the end because that's really well done.
4 years as the time span. I mean, 4 years is a long time. It is hella long to spend imprisoned.
Yes.
But it's also not long enough for fashion and trends to change substantially. So you're watching, think Merritt's story and Carl's story, which are presented as parallel timelines in episode 1.
Contemporaneous,
You think they're happening at the same time. And then you find out at the end, no, she was 4 years in the past the whole time. But it's not a long enough amount of time to see like, oh no, people don't dress like that anymore, or phones don't look that way anymore.
Right.
So you don't pick up on necessarily the time differences until it's revealed at the end, like, no, that's 4 years ago, and this is now the case they're investigating. And it was such a good twist. It was just a great, like, again, by the end of that first episode, I was completely hooked. Would have watched it even if it starred someone other than Matthew Goode.
I'm just gonna say, by the way, shout out to Matthew Goode for his work in Watchmen, the Zack Snyder movie. Really liked him in that one as well. And I echo your comments about Stoker.
Well, I have to say, like, when I heard he was cast in this show playing a quote unquote disheveled detective, I was like, no, like wrong casting, because Matthew Goode is like born to play creeps and vampires and like most recently popping up at the end of Abigail as like the creepy vampire dad. I'm like, that's his lane. Like, look at that man's face. Just look at him. Like he plays vampires and creeps and strange people. But he really just disappears into Carl Mork. I think the styling helps. He has a beard. His hair is different. Like the character is described in the book as being a bit shaggy, a bit unkempt, always looking. They keep saying he looks hungover. Like he's supposed to sort of look constantly hungover. I don't think they played that card as hard in the TV show, but he does look like someone who doesn't particularly care about his appearance. Doubtful that he's combing his hair every day. And I just think Matthew Goode just disappeared into that. So it was a really great job, because he doesn't often play these kinds of like everyman characters. Like he usually, like, he played freaking Lord Snowden in The Crown, He's the second husband. He's Lady Mary's rich second husband in Downton Abbey. He often gets cast as those kinds of characters. And so to see him play someone who is supposed to be like from a lower class background, he establishes in the show that he grew up in a council estate in England, which is like public housing. So he's supposed to have that kind of background. And I think he really sells it as someone who is not particularly interested in rich people's stuff. He has like a general contempt for rich people. And also his sense of self-satisfaction, his sense of self doesn't stem from possessions or materialism. It stems from his belief in his intellect and his ability to solve these crimes no one else can solve.
I would agree with you that they did a reasonably good job of making him look as ugly and disheveled as possible.
Oh, I didn't say ugly. No. Still a stone cold fox. Like Carl Mork can get it.
All right, fair.
It's just
apologies.
He's usually styled like he's so tall. He's got that cutting English bone structure. They usually style him as like very suave, very handsome, very dapper. Just go look at like Discovery of Witches, where again, he's playing a creepy vampire, but he looks amazing in that show. They did a great job of kind of bringing his styling down to, no, I believe he could be this guy just coming from nowhere and having this sort of regular existence, where normally he's cast in roles where he's not normal. So.
Yeah, fair.
But no, still hot.
Yeah. My mistake. Poor word choice by me. All right, let's talk about some of the other subplots this season that were kind of never fully resolved. First, there is the shooting of Mork and his two other colleagues at Leith Park. And I'm going to read here from denofgeek.com, which did a good summary of what went on here, but like, it's never solved. However, Carl Mork does have a dream sequence in which he imagines how this case might be resolved. And there is an open question of whether what is in the dream sequence is actually true. If it is true, here's what happened. Okay? And here's from denofgeek.com. The shooting was done on the orders of Leith Park criminal kingpin Eugene Arrington, whom we've yet to meet. According to Mork's dream, in which he shot Arrington's muscle, Charlie Bell, in the head, Arrington has a baby with Caroline Kerr, the witness who is intimidated into withdrawing her statement about the shooting. We also know, or at least have a pretty good idea, that P.C. Anderson was a corrupt officer working for Arrington, and that he may have been the one to, he may even have been the one to stab the victim, thought to have been a police informant, in the head. Anderson was a top recruit pretending to be a klutz, Mork realized, in order to cover up the fact that his fingerprints were all over the victim's flat. He also lied about being at the flat for a routine welfare check after being alerted by the victim's daughter. That was a quick-thinking ruse to explain his presence when Mork and Hardy showed up there unexpectedly. The last we saw of the Leith Park case, Moira looked to be taking it away from its lead investigator and possibly closing it unsolved, which may point to her also having been compromised by Arrington. As Hardy was one of the shooting's victims, surely that can't be the case file that she gave to Hardy to investigate without Mork in the season's closing moments? End quote. So there is some debate about like what is the case file that Moira gives to Hardy at the end, and some people think it is the Leith Park shooting. Some people
think it's implied that we're supposed to think it's the Leith Park shooting, but I wouldn't be surprised if they come back in a second season, it's something else entirely.
Who knows what it's going to be? But yeah, Sarah, you did not seem to think this was solved at all. Like, I don't think you believe in Carl Mork's dreams. Is kind of
well, it's not that I don't believe in his dream, because I think his dream, because he does say to the officer investigating that shooting, he's from a council estate. He knows how they work. He's like, there's going to be witnesses. They're going to be scared to talk because there's going to be a local criminal element controlling everything. He realizes that P.C. Anderson was probably dirty. Everyone is like really holding the shooting against him because as far as anyone knows, this fine young upstanding officer was killed in the line of duty because Carl Mork showed up somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. But Carl realizes actually that guy was probably in on it. He might have been the one who killed the old man in the chair who had a knife sticking out of his head. It took another great turn because at the beginning, again, they do a great job of making you think that this young constable is completely incompetent. He's bumbling through the crime scene. He's touching stuff. They're like, it comes up that he's basically fresh out of the academy. So they're having to tell him how to behave at a murder scene. And then Carl realizing later all of that was a ruse. He was covering his own tracks. He's touching stuff to give a reason for his fingerprints to be in the flat. When they do, come back with those results, they're going to find PC Anderson's fingerprints. Well, but we saw him touching stuff. So, he was a rookie. It was his first murder scene. He didn't really follow protocol. There would be a reasonable explanation. He realizes all of those things. But the idea that it's this specific guy ordering all of this to happen for potential corruption reasons is based on him coming from that same kind of background. Do we know that's exactly what happened in real life? No. So I do think there's a lot of reasonable grounding in Carl's background and his experience in some of the deductive reasoning he's doing in real time on that case to think at least part of this dream sequence is going to be true or very close to it. I think he's making very reasonable leaps in logic, not even leaps, steps. He's making very reasonable steps in logic to come to a conclusion. I do not think they have the evidence to back any of that up. And so I do think it is unsolved. And I think the idea that it would be exactly what he dreamed is it's too simple. No.
Okay. Fair, Sarah. Fair. Well, hopefully we'll get more resolution to the Leith Park shooting in season 2, should that season come to pass. Want to talk about the therapy scenes with Kelly MacDonald, who's his therapist?
Yeah.
This is a through line. Let me just say that prestige TV shows need to stop putting therapists into the shows. This is the third time I've seen this in recent memory. There was The Agency I just watched, which also had this kind of character. There was The Last of Us Part 2, or Season 2, I should say, on HBO. And now Kelly MacDonald in this show. And I think the ingenious solution that showrunners seem to have come up with is, what if a therapist was an asshole? That's kind of in season 2 of The Last of Us. And also it's what if it's a therapist, but she's an asshole? And it's okay, it's not as amusing as you think it is. And it got old in the first 10 minutes. I hated all this. None of this worked for me. Yeah.
It is also set up by the end of the season that she's a potential love interest for Carl, which I'm
even though their behavior is Carl accosts her while she's about to go on a date. It's extremely creepy, upsetting behavior, and I would say would be less likely to make him a romantic. Maybe if you're Matthew Goode, you can pull it off, but it's
yes, Matthew Goode 100% can pull that off. But also at the point that he shows up, she's meeting someone for a coffee date. He shows up unannounced, unexpected, has basically, essentially been using his police power to stalk her.
Yeah.
That is such a red flag that I'm you should not have a therapy license. They should probably revoke your license because you overlooked that.
Yeah.
It's so wildly out of pocket. And she does it to him. She shows up at his house later. Oh, because he also shows up at her house. He does it twice. He shows up at her date, and then Kelly MacDonald, pretty, age appropriate woman for Carl, same kind of age, but pretty and kind of foxy, and they have a little vibe going. Well, she was only temporary. When the real therapist returns, it's a very kindly older woman,
right?
And Carl is I'm having none of this,
and he's I don't want to fuck her, so I don't. Yeah, this is not worth engaging in.
She's not fuckable, so I'm gonna go. And he goes to her house. He does it twice. And then she shows up at his house now it's cute. And there is a part of me that's
terrible.
You know what? Y'all should be together. Take each other off the market. Save the rest of Edinburgh from each other. But I'm also this is not sexy. If this was supposed to be a little bit of a vibey, sexy thing, I'm the way you do that is she is his therapist temporarily. You establish that straight off the bat. This is a temporary arrangement. I'm only your therapist until the real one comes back. You give them a little bit of flirty vibes in their therapy sessions, but they toe the line because that's what a good therapist would do. And then when he should never crash her date, that's gross and weird. But if someone's it happened in the books, okay, it's gross and weird in the book too. It's like it's a gross and weird thing, and it makes it so unpalatable for them to be a romantic pairing. But I think there is a way to establish, like, oh, she's his therapist. There's a flirty vibe, but they can't do anything because she is his therapist, and it's inappropriate, and she knows it's inappropriate, and he knows it's inappropriate, and so they just sort of have this vibe that they can't act on. I'm like, oh, but that is sexy. That's like, now it's forbidden. Now everything we say is a double entendre. And then when she's finally not his therapist anymore, then they can encounter each other out in the world and be like, okay, now we can have this other relationship. But the showing up at the coffee date, the showing up at each other's houses, I'm like, a little bit, you're both demented. Please date each other and save everyone else. But also, I'm like, this is not great. This is not a good choice for either of you. I'm not into this relationship. Also, I feel like she didn't have a lot to do. Probably the least well-developed character.
Horrible. Like,
And
she added virtually nothing to the
Yeah,
plot or anything this
you
season.
could cut all of her scenes and we're missing nothing.
Yeah.
Carl's perpetual student roommate is a better therapist for
Yes.
him than her. So I'm like, again, I kind of only skimmed the first book. So I'm like, she must be in there, and this is a thing that they feel like they have to do. But I'm like, it added nothing to the show. And the most detestable Carl ever was when he crashed her coffee date.
Agreed on all counts. Just a really bad subplot, a very unfortunate subplot in a show that was otherwise pretty smart. This felt like not great, and that's as coming from somebody who really loves Kelly MacDonald as a performer. I just think this was not worthy of her talents. So very unfortunate. I've had therapists in real life, and one thing I appreciate about the therapists that I've encountered is one of the first things they say to you, or they said to me, was, hey, I just want to explain to you some of the rules of engagement here. We can never be friends. Like,
Yeah.
we, like, you and I, we can never see each other socially after we start this relationship, this therapist relationship. And if I see you out in the real world, I will not acknowledge you, because I will leave it. If you want to acknowledge me, that is okay. But I will leave it to you to decide whether you recognize me or not, because, I don't want to reveal to your friends that, we have this therapist relationship. So it's like, and that's a great way of establishing boundaries. And I understand, you have to be a little bit more interesting to be a show, but to what end is the question? To what end?
Well, but again, if they wanted it to be that romantic thing, the way you do that is by acknowledging that's the boundary they can't cross, and they don't cross it, and then all of their interactions are super crazy loaded because they know, we know, everybody knows that they're into each other, but they can't act on it. That is a delectable dynamic. And then you give them a moment right at the end of the series, or it's like, she's not his therapist anymore. Now they can have that relationship. Now they're free to see if it's real or if it was just a circumstance or whatever. But they just chose instead to be like, oh no, he's a full psycho.
Yeah.
And again, if I skipped that part in the book because I was skimming the first book, if that's in the book, it's wrong in the book too. The fact that it's in the book does not make it okay. See also Bridgerton season 1.
The other thing to acknowledge this season in terms of like major subplot, I guess, would be the Burns storyline and kind of pursuing what eventually amounted to pretty much a red herring, right, Sarah Marrs, if I have that correctly, of was Merritt's boss responsible for Merritt's disappearance, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, you need red herrings though. Like, you need the false
Sure,
trail that they pursue
absolutely.
for a while. And it does point to a systemic corruption problem in Scottish law enforcement that at the end we are wondering, is Moira caught up in that in some way? Like,
Right.
how far does that
There was a lot of
extend?
innuendo around, like, to what degree was this case ignored, and specifically Burns spiking the testimony of Kirsty, right? That was the
Yeah.
big thing of like, to what degree was Burns operating of his own volition? And I think it's eventually revealed that Burns feared for his life and his child's life, and that's kind of why he did what he did. But yeah, it leaves open the possibility that some people high up in the Scottish law enforcement are in on it and
or
trying
if
to make
not
some. Yeah,
in on it, that they maybe see the discrepancies and are looking the other way.
yeah,
Like, because it is ambiguous about like how, because there's passive and active corruption. And it's like, is this active corruption where they're knowingly making these choices? Or is it passive corruption in the sense that they sense something is wrong? They might have suspicions, but they're not pursuing it. And maybe when Merritt disappeared, maybe certain things became less complicated for certain people. And so they kind of just, they had an explanation. She fell off the ferry, and that was acceptable. People were like, people have done that. That makes sense. And so they just don't push it. And that's, so it's very ambiguous about how far does that go. But there is a suggestion that there is a systemic corruption problem, which again is something that could carry into future seasons, that there could be this sense of kind of constantly coming back to things are not quite right. They're not quite working the way they're meant to work. And what is the, who is the head of this many tentacled octopus?
yeah.
Like I could see a potential for the shooting at Leith Park to eventually connect to higher levels of corruption.
Is it Eugene Arrington, the character we haven't met yet in
Well,
Carl's
but even
Dream, perhaps?
even if that guy is involved, like, is he just one more link on a chain?
Yeah.
Because there's a huge difference between being a local crime boss and being someone who can pull the levers of power at the highest office in the land.
I have one other subplot I was going to bring up, but before I do that, Sarah Marrs, you want to let people know where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
You can find me online at laneygossip.com or on the Substack The Squawk. Various social medias at Cinesnark.
And I would strongly recommend you check out Sarah and my conversations here on the Decoding TV feed and YouTube channel about The White Lotus Season 3. Had so much fun breaking down that season with Sarah, and would recommend you check it out. The one other subplot I wanted to bring up, Sarah, is the subplot regarding Kirsty. I just thought that was actually fairly effective, right? The idea that she wants to help Merritt's case. Burns kills her testimony. It puts her in a terrible spot. And then the call that she has with Merritt is pretty heartbreaking because it's like unstoppable force meet immovable object. Like, Merritt's not going to go out of her way to help this person necessarily. And it just is a very tragic situation.
And she suffers. I mean, again, like long range consequences. She loses an eye. She's attacked in prison and she loses an eye as a result. I mean, again, like it's just now there's a difference. Like things are different now because of these choices that were made. And it is like the idea that the lead prosecutor was like, well, she was a drug addicted, in and out of jail person, and the jury would not believe her. It would be skeptical to the jury. Yeah, that comes up. If you are a true crime aficionado, you will sometimes hear that in various cases where they do or don't use certain witness testimonies because they think people won't be sympathetic to the jury. But they leave this poor girl in this terribly imperiled position. And I'm like, there had to be, you could put her in protective custody, or like there had to be something you could do to protect her, and they do nothing, and she is grievously injured. So that's just like it's just another person who these consequences just keep rippling out.
Yeah.
And it like alienates her family from being helpful on anything else that they may or may not know. It's like they're not going to help the police because their daughter or their sister was like so grievously injured when the law did nothing to help her. So you have these kind of permanent consequences that come from those things.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was another subplot I was quite a fan of. Anyway, those are most of the subplots I wanted to run through, Sarah Marrs. Is there anything else that happened this season of Department Q that really resonated with you that we haven't discussed yet?
Well, I liked Rose quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was that actress's first film or TV credit, I think. But she was really great. And she was on desk duty because she was involved in a hit and run accident during a high-speed chase. She hit an elderly couple and they died. So again, it's intentional or not, things happen. There are consequences. Now she's dealing with this PTSD. She had a nervous breakdown at work. And basically her only way path to investigating is through Department Q. So I do like that they are making this little unit of sort of outcasts and misfit toys that they're going to be the island of misfit toys within this police department. I really liked her performance, though. I thought she was a great character. And I really, really hope we get a second season, because I would like to see more of Carl and Rose and Akram working together on seemingly impossible cases. And James as well. He comes in right at the end, kind of comes back to work in some capacity. He'll probably end up being like the computery one. But
Rose is played by Leah Byrne. She has been on screen before in TV shows, but very minor roles. This is her first lead role in a show this high profile before. And yeah, I would say very effective in the show. And I really kind of, even though you kind of see what's going to happen, like you can kind of predict, oh, here are the people they're going to assemble for this team.
You know who the Avengers are.
Yeah,
from the
you know who
first
the Avengers are going to be, but it's still effective because they're very root forable. They're very they're people who you want to see succeed and overcome their challenges. So they're all likable in their own way. And yeah, Leah Byrne as Rose.
I liked her dynamic with Carl, where she's like, "Oh, you're teaching me," and he's like, "Fuck off."
Yeah, yeah.
So uninterested in being a mentor.
Absolutely. Anything else, Sarah Marrs?
No, I've kind of been watching, it's been in the top 10 of TV shows for English language stuff. I'm just like, second season. We're going to get that second. Because there's a million books. So.
Right. And as of the recording of this, so we're recording this in early June. You're listening to this a little bit later than we're recording it. There has not been a second season announced yet. There might be in the future. Hasn't happened yet. We are really hoping for a renewal because this is a great show. Another show, by the way, that I would catch up on, Sarah Marrs, if I were you, that's very similar in some ways to this show. Slow Horses, if you haven't seen that show.
Oh, yes. No, I'm a fan of Slow Horses for sure.
A lot of the same vibes of you have this kind of very disgruntled asshole character leading this department, and there's like a mystery every season that they kind of need to solve, and it's this forgotten department that people are neglecting, and so a lot of similar vibes. So if you are a fan of Department Q,
specifically neglecting it because they're spies who have made mistakes in the field, and they've been shunted off to this department called Slew House or Slow Horses, where that it's just, again, it's the island of misfit toys, and that's kind of my favorite detective story, is when it's the quirky detectives, and they do Slow Horses and Department Q. They do a great job of the quirky detective without beating you over the head with the cute bat. So it's not annoying.
Fair enough. And Gary Oldman is just an irresistible character in that show, to be fair. So anyway, those are some thoughts on Department Q. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.